Hey everyone, Sloan here with sort of a crossover episode for those of you who track the World of Money podcasts. Our guest in this episode is Mary Childs, who some listeners may recognize as one of the many voices behind NPR's excellent Planet Money podcast. She's also the author of The Bond King, a look at the life and legacy of PIMCO founder Bill Gross, the unusual organization that he built, and the fixed income market that it came to dominate. Our conversation starts by talking about why stocks are dumb, and then really zeroes in on the elements of operational alpha that made the firm what it is. We also touch on what Bill Gross's success means for the neurodiverse community and what she's learned about being a legendary investor in the process of writing her book. That conversation starts about 13 minutes into this podcast, but don't skip our banter. That's lame. Maybe also transphobic? I don't know. Ashby and I talked about the work that sovereign development funds are doing to build resilience in places like Egypt and Indonesia, then finished out the podcast by talking about the hard things in our life, taking questions from listeners, and, as always, giving you an honest-to-God gardening tip. If you'd like to ask a question in an upcoming episode, please write to us. The email is freemoneypod@gmail.com. And if you would like to ask a question, and if you wouldn't like to ask a question, but you would like to do me a favor, I imagine that there are several of you out there like that, go ahead and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It helps other people find the show and is a really nice way to manifest some positive vibes. Before I kick things over to everyone's favorite disclosure pirate, I'll just mention that this episode of the Free Money Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Cordicius, who are experienced doulas to investment offices navigating digital transformation. Cordicius focuses on your data so you can focus on alpha. For more info, visit cordiciusllc.com. Take it away, Sharkbait.
Ahoy, Free Money Podcast listeners! I'm Sharkbait Buckley, the Disclosure Pirate, and I'm here to set ye straight about what's going on with this here show. Sloan Ortel works for Invest Vegan LLC, a New York registered investment advisor. Ashby Monk works for Stanford University, Adapar, Future Proof, Long Game, and various startups. All opinions expressed by either Sloan or Ashby are entirely their own, and do not reflect the opinions of their crew or any company. Clients who invest vegan may maintain positions in securities and strategies discussed in this podcast. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Invest Vegan and its representatives are properly licensed or exempted, and a client agreement has been executed. Arr!
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar.
So this is probably going to be... Welcome to the Free Money Podcast!
What do we do here?
It's where we give you the Brooklyn Bay Area connection about institutional investing, that you
Because you
literally
want to
crave.
know more about these institutions and how they invest.
Yeah, like, wait a second. You're telling me that there are a bunch of institutional investors that, control the market?
No
Stop.
doubt. And they are
Stop.
institutionalized. Not in the sense that they're locked up in
some of
prison,
them.
but that they are doing their jobs in a routine way that we can learn about and explain to you.
Well, yeah, and of course, the picayune details of these processes are outrageously influential, right? Because we're talking, of course, about
We are.
trillions of dollars.
140 of them.
Which, not much money to me, not much money to you, I know, Ashby, but, I think, a trillion here, a trillion there. It
I'm
adds
still
up.
trying to figure out what my Dogecoin is worth. Is it trillions? Is it zero? I don't know.
I really, the thing about crypto that I think is really magical that we lost altogether was there was a moment in, maybe 2017 where a whole bunch of people who sold drugs in 5 years ago were suddenly
Yeah,
rich for
I
no
noted
apparent
that.
reason. Because they had a whole bunch of residual crypto going on. And honestly, I miss the magic of that.
I am willing to admit, especially now that it's exploding, that I never really bought any crypto. I was not a big crypto investor, and so it feels like we're moving back to the natural order of things as crypto kind of unravels. I saw that OpenSea This is not my news, but I'll share with you. OpenSea, which is a crypto NFT trading platform that was like valued at many billions of dollars.
It was the shit. It was the future of finance. It was
Yeah.
everything. It was
Trading, it turns out, on OpenSea is down a little bit this quarter, 99%.
99. I mean, like that's what's a little bit of a liquidity evaporation among friends. They're buying it for the art, though. They're they're long-term investors.
Yep. Because we all need a gorilla / monkey version of ourselves out there. And that's where you go get that.
Speaking of gorilla versions of ourselves, like this is another. I mean, we didn't plan to go into making fun of crypto, but why not? It's here. It's available to us.
I don't even know how we got here. Oh, I made a joke about trillions of dollars of Dogecoin. Anyway, tell me.
Oh yeah. Well, but so Eminem and another performer whose name escaped me performed as their Bored Ape avatars at the VMA, and the reaction from everyone was like, "Wow, this is the lamest thing."
I did not see a single positive tweet about that, and I saw lots of tweets.
Yeah. It's like the Mark Zuckerberg thing where he's like this, neutered, corporate stooge in the in the metaverse. It's like, do you really think this is like a cool thing?
He needs to put more sunblock on and get back out there on that surfboard with the flag.
I mean, just a quick tip for Mark Zuckerberg from my pals in the trans community. I mean, if you're gonna create an online avatar, you might as well be an anime girl. I mean, it's just like everyone does it. It makes perfect sense. It seems
like it would.
Anyway.
So I do have some news. And I actually have 3 bits of news that I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit in before a certain guest arrives for our big famous crossover episode.
All the money podcasts be coming together. Ooh, building that suspense.
I'll fold these into 2 news stories. The first one, let's talk about the Sovereign Development Funds. Sovereign Development Funds, a category of sovereign wealth fund as defined by the International Monetary Fund, is around 2008. The Development Fund has a dual objective, which is why I spend so much time studying these organizations. They want to drive development and return. And the way they drive development is by driving return, because in driving return, they attract capital into their geographies. And these funds are popping up all over the world. There's one in Russia. There's one in India that's been very successful. There's one now in Indonesia. And that's one of my little news items. Indonesia has just announced that they're striking a deal to expand the Belawan port in Sumatra Island, which sounds like a nice port and a nice place. I think I've actually been to Sumatra. Palembang. I have been to Palembang, which is a place on the island of Sumatra, I believe, if I know my geography. But they are doing a $7.5 billion deal, the Indonesian Investment Authority, with Dubai Ports. And that's a big deal. That's bigger than the fund size itself, I believe. Equally interesting, Egypt has recently set up one of these funds. And there was news out this week that they have already, and I think this organization in Egypt has only been going for about 8 months. They've announced they've already attracted $3.3 billion from other sovereign wealth funds into Egypt this year since they've launched. Coming from the Saudis, coming from Qatar, and the UAE. And so it's just fascinating to me. I feel like this is a brand new policy tool that all the countries are now using to catalyze domestic markets and attract capital.
Well, yeah, and the things that come to mind for me when I think of those 2 countries is like, gosh, are those places in need of some foreign direct investment right now? Like Egypt, huge food importer, Indonesia, huge energy importer. Both of those places, really having a balance of payments issue right now. And wow, how cool that you can sort of shore up the case for investing domestically, attract some institutional investors, and kind of plug that gap. It's that's neato. And I think like when you said $7 billion in Indonesia, I have a little bit of a one-track
Good.
mind, so I was like, okay, I'm thinking of The Thing.
What thing?
The thing, that time that that was Malaysia, not Indonesia.
What? Just tell me what it.
Yeah, I think that one MDB.
That was
the big
Malaysia.
scandal.
Yeah, so nearby neighbors.
That was Malaysia, which is not Indonesia. And don't get it twisted out there, folks.
So the one MDB, which is a nearby sovereign development fund to the Indonesian one, there's a Netflix special about it, and you never want to be in a Netflix special. I think I've come to decide. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the free money Netflix special is going to be the story of how we really effed up something.
Yeah, or how due to weird incentives in the media business, our stupid podcast became much more profitable than the investing, and we just got a CGI budget. Yeah,
exactly. My last news. Okay, this is fast. CalPERS, one of our favorite big American pension plans.
We know
We've had many people related to the CalPERS on the show. CalPERS is out there telling managers to get diverse. They're pushing the managers. They're collecting data. They see value. And for those of you who don't know, CalPERS, and this story taught me this fact, is being led by 3 women right now. Now, you knew about the 2.
Huh.
We've got Nicole Musico as the chief investment officer. We've got Marcy Frost, former guest on the show.
Alumnus.
She broke a lot of news on here
podcast,
that actually ended up in Reuters.
Yep.
Board president is a woman named Teresa Taylor. And so the 3 leaders of this organization came together on a panel recently, which was where the news came from. And Nicole was really pushing to say, look, if we can do it, you can do it. And we'll see. They've launched a whole bunch of data collection efforts around this. And then, maybe you'll manage what you measure. That's my last news, which I think is newsworthy.
I mean, I think that's quite newsworthy. I mean, it's funny. I think as an emerging manager, the answer to addressing diversity in the investment business is often another form. So I'm always like, oh no, another initiative. Ugh.
How about just having a role model? That's why I do a lot of these consulting projects around the world. It's like, rather than telling people what to do, show them what to do, and then they can be a role model. CalPERS is a role model. 3 women leading that organization.
Yeah.
My gosh, go back 7 years to the conferences, the conference circuit, as it were. It was all dudes.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I mean, speaking of hello. Guess who we got in the show? It's the one and only Mary Childs. Oh, and she's got
glitch.
A giant cutout of the Bond King right
Hi.
behind her. Oh. Hi. We were admiring your cardboard cutout of your book.
Thank you for knowing that it's a cardboard cutout, because a lot of people are like, oh my God, your book. And I'm like, do you think it's that big?
Yeah, I was going to say. I've got a very really big version of my book here.
Yeah, exactly. I just want you to admire the largeness of my book. All right, I've noted. This is a no video podcast.
It's no video.
It's no one will ever see this video.
Because I keep being in podcasts where I'm like looking off to the side, and I didn't know that makes you look very unhinged. Now I know, and a little cross-eyed. Like I'm just like, okay, that's an important lesson. You're supposed to be back here. You're supposed to have your ring light. I don't have it.
Yeah. I know.
Mm-hmm. We wanted to create a safe space for unhinged people.
You do not look unhinged or cross-eyed right now. So that's the good news for the listeners.
That means so much to me. Thank you. Yes, all of the listeners will know that I look
normal, not
that unhinged today.
Well, and you also wrote a great book, and I gotta say, so I'm reading The Bond King. I don't have the giant cardboard cutout. Yes. I have the Kindle version. Not yet. That's a good point. But I get to this sentence where it's like, people think stocks are more fun, but in my opinion, they are wrong. Yeah. Stocks are dumb. Um, so that
Yeah.
seems a little mean.
I'm so sorry. I have gotten some feedback from some stock investors on that one.
Interesting.
On that point. Here, let me get closer to my mic.
But like, why? But you have a point, though.
I do. Thank you. I completely agree with you and myself. Yeah, I think, it would be surprising if the structure that is our financial institution allowed us to actually play, right? Like that would run counter to some of the things that I think we know about our beloved institutions. And I think that this is one of those cases where like we're allowed in the stock market, we're allowed to have like our teeny weeny slivers of like equity ownership, and like we think that we're in the game. We're not in the game. Like we're at the kids table. This is ridiculous. They're letting us play around and like watch CNBC for like Carl Icahn to say something, which like that's fun. Like that's just
Entertainment.
It's more akin to like Gladiator. Exactly. Like that's what that is. And then meanwhile, there's like an actual room with powerful people, not always smoking cigars, but it's happened. Like I do think that like I think PIMCO did have a cigar tradition for a while when they closed a new account, but Bill Gross hated smoke.
Oh.
So they did away with that. But it is, the bond market is bigger, it's more influential. It's where, you can go in and take someone's assets because they said so in the documents.
Yeah.
It's you hand over the keys. Like it's a I don't know, call James Carville for more details.
I feel like also bond market feels like Wild West. Like there's still it's still not quite as digitized. And I know this isn't the next question you were expecting, but it is wild out there that how untechnologized the bond market actually is compared to the stock market. And that's why people can kind of swoop in and take your stuff because they're sneaking terms in there.
And that's on purpose, right? Like they have long been resisting that change. Like this is, what was it? When I started covering corporate credit, I didn't cover loans as much or really ever for a long time. And I don't know that I've like focused on loans ever, but my loan colleagues, that at Bloomberg, we were very finely tranched as to what asset class and what type of thing we covered. And my loan colleagues, they were like, oh yeah, no, we need fax machines. Like it's T plus 30. Like it's literally like, and that was like 2012. They've got do away with the fax machines like 10 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
It's like
bond traders are like, they literally have two phones to their face with cords attached to them.
Yeah.
Still.
And they love it.
I know.
Because that way it's a relationship
so
business.
Badass.
That way the bid ask stays nice and wide. Like you get a lot more. It's more fun. It's more lucrative. It's more, you have a lot more job security. And I think those are a lot of reasons why they've managed to keep it protected in that way.
It's a good point that like that lack of technology is what drives the like opportunity to outperform. But also in your book, we kind of picked up some of these themes around PIMCO really getting efficient in the way they managed that inefficiency. We spend a lot of time here talking about operational alpha. Can you talk about the operational excellence in those places?
And I think you're so right. Yeah, operational alpha is so real, and I'm so glad that that's like a drum that you beat because I think it's underappreciated. And this does present a really clear shot for me where I can just get on my little soapbox about Pat Fisher, who was one of the, I would say, founders of PIMCO, who never even got made partner.
No.
Interesting. So weird. So random how that happened. But she basically helped to keep operations. She was like in charge of the back office and HR and occasionally the cash desk and many other things over her time at PIMCO. And the importance of clean operations, obviously if you're bad at settling trades, your trading partners, your counterparties are going to be less excited to trade with you. They're like, that person's a joker. I'm just not going to like go to them first because I don't know if I can believe with certainty that trade will actually close, and no one likes a failed trade. So, that's just like super baseline. But then furthermore, she instituted a process where she basically started giving the banks grades as to whether they got back to her in time, whether they were clean on their execution, whether they, and just kind of holding their feet to the fire. And once the banks got wind of this, they were like, oh, I want to be on the top of that spreadsheet, and just became much more competitive, and therefore PIMCO's execution improved dramatically. So, that's one example. She also, when they moved to a new building, she had pneumatic tubes installed to reduce errors between the trade floor and the back office, because people would like come running up and be like, like a ticket would get lost in a drawer. Just so tangible, so literal like that. And that obviously causes great snarls. And then the trader would be all mad. And then the back office would be like, it was just very dramatic. And in order to reduce potential error in that way and like just keep things moving along, she put pneumatic tubes. You used to like run.
I was going to say, we might
we
might need to explain to the youth what a pneumatic tube is.
Using air technology. What I can only describe as a vacuum.
Yeah, vacuum vacuum tubes.
Is it some element of space? No, you used to put it in like a little VHS cover, which you get like a plastic box. The babes don't know what that is. VHS
no, thank you for clarifying with VHS.
Yeah, exactly. So a little box. You put your little ticket in a. Actually, I think they would roll it up and put that little tube in the larger pneumatic tube, and it would go zoop.
Yeah.
And then land on the other end of the office at Pat Fisher's, in her domain. And then they would get to, enter the information correctly. It would not end up crumpled in a drawer next to like an old banana. So it would work out a lot better. And I made up the banana part. No one ever did that. Just for clarity. But that is, there were a bunch of different examples about this where Pat Fisher just like cleaned things up and made things work. And like, there's this one trade in 1983 that would have been truly impossible without that kind of operational efficiency and cleanliness. And the ability to be precise and be careful and be accurate, I think enabled PIMCO to be early to mortgages, to be early to financial futures, to capitalize on those markets before everybody else got there, which just means years and years of extra alpha.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like our listeners at home are like, oh, okay, wow, that sounds like pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want alpha, I guess.
They do. They want to use
if you're into that sort
the
of thing.
Hyperloop for mail. That's the way I would describe the pneumatic tube for the youth, the Hyperloop for your mail. Exactly. And just as completely insane, like why the heck do you need these tubes flying around? Anyway, were you going to say something, Mary?
No, I'm just thinking like it's hard today to envision because things are so much less tangible than they were back then, like everything is a digital pneumatic tube now. So it's a little bit like it's harder to conceptualize. But what I like too about this example is that it is so easy. You're just like, oh, I see. Like it went zoop and then it went thunk.
Yeah.
I get it. And that's easier than the other way where everyone was crying and there were old bananas. And I think that like it's less obvious, but there are still going to be ways, to find these kinds of increased efficiencies and just make things cleaner across the board.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of speaks to the investment banks and the big fixed income managers. Like there was always this investment in technology. And so it doesn't surprise me that they went to the pneumatic tube to get a little bit faster and a little bit more, well defined. Like if you go back to the history of technology and finance, you'll find carrier pigeons and other things like that.
Quite.
But
it's weird how hard. Sorry to
no problem.
It's weird how hard it is to move away from that.
Yeah.
Like you look at the Citibank mistaken payment in 2020, where they accidentally sent $900 million to the exact wrong or right people, and like. That was preventable had they upgraded that technology and invested in a different technology. True. Because that was just so antiquated. And people say that about Goldman and they say that about, so there are, we think of them as these kind of cutting edge informational technology superstars, but there are ways in which it's just like not always necessarily immediately cost effective to address that stuff long term.
It's obviously. True. There's a big tension.
Yeah, as long as they stop turning in trading profits, I'm sure that the perception of them as technological superstars will dissipate.
Absolutely. And this like idea that like the technology worked and so we're never going to change it until it stops working. Well, like we're constantly trying to use crises in this industry to like drive change. But the point here is to say there seems to be a willingness to spend on technology, but there's very little willingness to improve culture. And one of the things that was my attempt at a transition.
That was a really good
thanks. But you will know, having read some books such as your book, but also Liar's Poker. If you've read Liar's Poker,
of a kind, if you will,
you will see some certain culture on a bond trading floor that will seem outrageous. and it comes through at PIMCO as well. And so is there something about dominating the fixed income markets that just makes people jerks?
I mean, it's a very good question. It's one I've thought a lot about. And I think, yes, I think there's something. Well, first of all, it's no accident, right? Like the culture at Solomon was one that Bill Gross respected. Bill Gross loved the Solomon energy and explicitly wanted that. Like it was one of the few sell side institutions that I think Bill respected. And you'll see a lot of kind of carryover. The CEO for a long time, Bill Thompson, came from Solomon Brothers. There was just a lot of kind of intentional adaptation of that and like bringing on of that, that swagger. And I think it does help in fixed income because somewhat contrary to popular belief, scale helps in fixed income. There is sort of a bullying and aggression to the actual trading that I think does result in, more basis points. And
actual
that's what
bullying,
after, right?
adding value.
Yeah, exactly. That this, there's this kind of longstanding debate as to whether or not PIMCO being hard on the street and mean to their Wall Street counterparties, if that was productive. People who have experienced it very often tell me that it's not. They're like, I hated it and I'm not going to give them first look because they were so mean to me last time and like it was just miserable. I think, PIMCO kind of behaved this way the whole time throughout their ascent, sort of before it was justifiable from an AUM perspective. And I think it was to their benefit. First of all, you establish that reputation. Like we're PIMCO, you need our information flow. Right. Like that's just, and that's effective. And that consistency I think is useful. And then just being able to get like being that scale and having that like brand as being aggressive and as being and having like asserted that you need my information flow, therefore you must trade with me even if it's not profitable to you. That became true, and that helped them to get anchor deals on new issue bonds, which is indeed still one of the places you can make more money. And I think that that's really critical, that like the swagger and the bullying and the abuse, like in the short run it is bad for individual traders' relationships with their Wall Street sales coverage. But I think in the longer run, it does help PIMCO very regrettably. I don't really like that conclusion, but.
So there's sort of like a first day in prison style lesson for upstart asset managers, right? Where it's like, all right, just take out find the biggest primary dealer you can.
Oh my God.
Just get those basis points and then tell everybody you did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure it's in the cafeteria.
Just or get it pneumatic tubed to everyone in your various divisions.
I mean, that's so sad, and hopefully it's changing. I do think that in the pandemic, so much more went electronic, went digital, and I think that that's like probably helpful. I don't know. I hate that this is where I've arrived. I do hate it. I just want to be clear.
I think it's so funny.
Well, I mean, I think you can't know a lot about a thing and be a blind optimist about it.
I'd love to unknow.
One thing that like an angle that I haven't seen that many people dig into on your book is like, you've written this, I actually can't think of another, I mean, outside of like Warren Buffett related, biographies. I can't think of another like neurodiverse business leader that has the same kind of profile as Bill Gross. And like I guess like I'm curious, you've spent all this time with this guy, you've spent all this time with his legacy, right? And like, so what do folks like in the neurodiverse community take from his story, if anything?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's an enormous cohort of people that just respect the bejesus out of this guy and would follow him anywhere, read his investment outlooks when they come out. I think his website, people just like write into him all the time, like using that like contact form, just to tell him how much they respect him and that like he, created this big thing. He's this great trader, whatever. Right? So I think that's alive and well. And that's both like extremely retail investors like me. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know this guy explains things really lucidly and I appreciate that about him. And then it's also just like mutual fund managers, RIAs, like all like people in the industry professionally too, who have learned from him and followed him for so long. And he has this like very strong reputation in that way. I think there's also a cohort of people who think that he was the beneficiary of a bull market and he's like, not that impressive. And those people I'm like, I mean, in both cases, you got to take it with a little salt. I think he's neither a god nor just lucky.
Mm.
But his legacy is, he did create largely this market, and then he publicized it. And he's not, in my view, he's really just not just lucky. Yes, he was lucky. We were all lucky. There were a lot of other people who could have ridden that same wave, and some did. But I do think like he combined it with this kind of larger than life personality. He wanted to be famous. He went on Wall Street Week all the time, this PBS show every Friday night that was like the benchmark show. If you cared about Wall Street, you watched this show. And being the face of the bond market was very helpful for him and very, I think helpful in establishing PIMCO as a company and as that, aforementioned aggressive brand. But I think that's all real to me. Now, in his later years, I do think his legacy has changed somewhat. Regrettably, I think the more public spats he's gotten in have been unhelpful, but they do kind of demonstrate fundamentally similar personality traits that were effective in the bond market and are less effective in bilateral social dealings.
Like so hypothetical, like blasting loud music at all hours
yes.
to wring some concessions out of your neighbor, all of that,
Exactly.
squeezing a basis point wherever you can get it.
Exactly.
I love it.
Like one thing that rewarded him for so long and has to be hardwired at this point is he was constrained. His universe was constrained intentionally. He competed against the benchmark, right? And this universe of peers who were also competing against the benchmark. But if you make your benchmark your neighbor, like you're never gonna win. There's no like ever. It just doesn't have the same outcome. It doesn't have. You can't win in the same way. And I think that is, if you've fashioned your life around constantly having a competitor, having a benchmark, that it's hard to leave that.
Yeah, I mean, like, and speaking of leaving that, I mean, like, I think your depictions of the PIMCO workspace were kind of like, I guess they served, to me as like affirmation of, not taking a road, that taken me to a trading floor in Huntington Beach, California.
Right.
But more than that, like, the picture of the firm's culture that came out was very, I don't know. Is weird? Does weird cover it?
Weird's one word. I've heard that word used, yes, by sources and otherwise. I like intense. I feel like that captures a lot. Yeah, petty. I don't know. I talked to so many people about this, and one of the main things. I mean, obviously, I ever talked to a bajillion people for this book, but one of the things that came through was that it's just such a closed circuit. Someone likened it to prison. So your earlier analogy is not dissimilar, where it's like, you can't, it's in Newport Beach, there's not that much else to do. PIMCO is kind of the only game in town in Newport Beach. So you're there, you're stuck, and you're in this, like, you work so many hours that you go home, you go to sleep, you wake up, you come back, like, that's your whole life. You might have a family, congratulations, but like, that's not, like, you're substantially the like interpersonal dynamics that you're going to care about, the things that are occupying your mind are going to be your things at work. And you can't escape. There's no way to like go to get drinks with your friend at Citigroup and they're like, well, I heard that Brevin Howard is hiring. And you're like, oh my God. Like that just doesn't happen to the same extent in Newport Beach. And I think that closed circuit makes the stakes so much higher in all of these interactions and makes everyone act so much worse. Like if you're playing with more cards, if you have more diverse options, if you're able to kind of move fluidly between firms or, at least even in different social interactions and social dynamics, you get kind of a brain cleanse. You get to reset, and I don't think that is available in Newport Beach.
I mean, like honestly, I wasn't even thinking about this, but probably a great, and pregnant takeaway for our listeners who are at, institutions that are, located a little bit out in the sticks.
Juneau.
Yeah,
but I was just
shout out to Alaska Permanent. Yeah. What up?
And not to suggest increasing your carbon footprint, but in that vein, like, yeah, travel is good. Like going to see your colleagues and like former coworkers who are now at, place that is not Juneau.
Yeah,
is helpful, is mentally helpful, and keeps you kind of healthy and fresh at your place of work and like sane. Keeps you able to like see the stakes more clearly, I think.
The one thing that I want to kind of leave, end the conversation with is kind of like like I guess one of my signature too deep questions. Trademark.
Yes,
but I'm curious, like you've studied this legendary. right? You've gotten to the point where you have unpublished footnotes about him, and all kinds of premonitions and vibes and whatnot, and a sense of how occupying that office affected his life. Like, what have you learned about just that space that he occupied, through the course of writing this book? Do you think it's a healthy thing to exist?
No. I mean, this is going to sound a little trite, but I think it's really lonely. I think it's, he does have friends, which people don't think that he does, which is also itself quite sad. I met some of his friends, and they are real, and I think that so I can confirm. But it is lonely. Like, you become so powerful and so rich and so influential and so important and a legend and that's maybe what you wanted. Maybe that's what you fashioned your entire career after. But once you get there, or even on the path to getting there, your like in his case, I'll stop using the second person because we're only so many of us are Bill Gross. In his case, like, his co-founders fell away. They retired, they moved on. His peers fell away to a large extent. Some are still around and still active, but it was harder and harder for him to trust people, in part because they were new to him, in part because he's like, I just don't know you for that long. Like, I think trust is kind of a hard thing for him and maybe all humans. And after a while, everyone, like, there comes this distance between him and the rest of the world, and I mean that within just the firm, where he couldn't, everyone's like trying to get something from him, everyone's trying to make eye contact and like do like score a point in a meeting, and it's just, I think the intensity of that, he thinks of himself as shy and introverted and insecure, and it should be noted also autistic. He's gotten a diagnosis, and I think before, all of this went down basically in 2014. And I think we had a far lesser appreciation for neurodivergence and what that means, especially in the workplace. And I don't know if that would play out differently today. But I think the chasm between him and the rest of the firm, like, they didn't see him as insecure. They didn't see him as just shy and introverted. They were like, this guy's a jerk. Like, he's not, he's coming to work with all these like barbs and he's being mean to me in a meeting, and like, why? And so I think the difference in occupying that seat for as long as he did and being that legend, I think, is super isolating, and there's almost no way around it. Like, what are you going to call Bill Gates and like try to bro down? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. You keep your high school friends or whatever, but it's just a lonely existence.
It's hearing you talk about it. It reminds, like, you can start to think about like what it is to be Ray Dalio at Bridgewater, or pick one of these like legendary managers that almost invented an industry. By the way, like ridiculous culture and like some like real weird stuff going on there in Connecticut, right? Like, sounds very similar to PIMCO in that sense, but yeah, just fascinating to hear you describe it, and like lucky that you got to go in and kind of diagnose it, the culture and the organization.
I do feel lucky that I got such access and that people were so willing to talk to me, of course, including Bill. I will say, like, I was just reading his most recent investment outlook, which, he's still publishing them. And this one was talking about, it's better to have been a billionaire. It is better to move through the second half of life as a billionaire rather than the alternative. More stressful, but many more chances to buy temporary happiness, as with a private plane or a nonchalant attitude toward medical bills. Okay, so I don't know that I think more stressful is not what he meant, generously.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that there is stress that comes with being a billionaire. And indeed, I would argue that's a great reason to give away your money and not be a billionaire anymore. Congratulations. Like, we have a solution. It's available to you. But at the same time,
cure.
Exactly. Like, let me know if you need help thinking this through. I'm happy to think it through with you. But I think, the stress is different in kind, and that matters a lot. Just have to say it.
It's awesome.
Wow, well, look, I honestly, I can't recommend the book enough. I was laughing out loud. We were going to do this as our beach reads episode, and then literally all of us got COVID.
Yeah, every single one of us. Good time.
Here we are, though. We made it.
We made it through. Did anyone lose taste and smell?
No.
Yeah, I mean, like, only the usual amount of tastelessness for me. Yeah. I was like out for 10 days.
Yeah. I was pretty dysfunctional, but here we are, and I'm proud of us for getting through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we made a podcast and everything. Who says that we're just a bunch of useless influencers? Come on. Mary Childs, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us on the Free Money Podcast.
Thank you. This
the
was
book
really
is
fun.
The Bond King. It was a blast.
Awesome book.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Outstanding.
I mean, like, I can't recommend that book enough. It, like, it's just, when you get to actually get inside a story of the industry modernizing over 40 years, that's so rare,
And but also the cultural and the leadership elements of these organizations are just astounding and repetitive. They're astoundingly repetitive,
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, gosh, do we have to deal with like I see a lot of these types, both in like venture capital world, but also in an entrepreneurship world. Like something about these superstars that redefine industries, they see the world differently, and whether that is, comes with a label or it is just something about their creativity. I've always had that thought rattling in my head, like some of these people who are legends, like, yeah, they see the world differently in part because that's how their brain is wired.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that if you look at, like the standard, like the story that you're supposed to tell if you are trying to go in and get a job as, like, an equity analyst or something like that, would be like, oh yeah, I used to memorize baseball cards. I'm really, like, fascinated with, like, price and, like, haggling or whatever. But like, fixations and memorization and, deep special interests that are hard to explain to people are, really kind of common denominators of a lot of a lot of, like, distinctive investing strategies. And like, I kind of feel like you have to be at least a little bit weird to amass any kind of successful track record in this business.
Like, you should be a weirdo, but I don't think we in this industry, and I know especially on the LP side, when they're doing due diligence on new managers, it's like they're actually trying to weed out weirdos. It's like the governance is like, oh no, we gotta avoid these weirdos. We gotta make sure they tick all these. But actually, it's these people who see the world differently, and so I don't know where I'm going with it. I just find it really fascinating. Read the book.
Read the book, but yeah, it's, I mean, yet another case in point and reason for us to think about, kind of, are there ways that we're being blind to people who think differently than us? And like, particularly with neurodiversity, I think it's, like, important to consider that we may not have operative mental models for the way that people experience sensations like, loud sound.
Yeah.
Like, there, like, people who share open plan offices may literally have a colleague who experiences a loud sound as physical pain. And like, I just think we're really in the early stages of just building empathy around that. But beyond that, like, realizing, that, little kids who have cognitive differences can grow up to be captains of industry.
Yeah. And if you go work at Bridgewater for a decade, you may end up with your own label of neurodiversity. I've heard it used that way, like, they were at Bridgewater for a long time, and that's why they're so direct. And it's like, wow.
I mean, like,
because the culture there, just for people to know, is radical candor. That's like, and they record every single meeting.
Yeah.
And so,
yep.
And you've got, like, instant ratings of each other on an iPad app. Like, it's very intense over there.
It's literally a Black Mirror episode. I mean, like, it just, it wouldn't rate as a Black Mirror episode because it's, like, too normal. But yeah, like, you have, I mean, I love, Bloomberg columnist Matt Levine has this, like, mental model of Bridgewater that he trots out a fair bit, where he's like, at Bridgewater, the computers, set everything up so that the humans don't get in their way, and engineer all of these, like, contentious meetings and stuff like that.
That's hilarious.
Just so that the algorithm has its way.
That's right.
Very, very powerful stuff. Anyway, what's been hard for you lately, my friend?
Oh, well, first of all, sometimes I find the drive time shows, I got to, like, slap my face a couple times because it's a little bit early.
Oh yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, you're really you're bearing the brunt of the drive time shows, because out there on the California, I mean, this is like a very breezy lunchtime hour for me out here.
That's all good. I mean, I'm loving it because we come in, we're fresh, we got some good ideas, not burned out by the day, but also
Yep.
it's a little bit harder to just get myself like wrapped around the free money vibe. But that's not what's hard. I think what's hard is actually what Mary brought up in there is about like how you maintain friendly relationships when you're building all these things. And I think I just had this like reflection coming out of vacation I had where we invited two friends and families to vacation. And it was like this realization that like I don't see non-work people very much. And it's awesome when I get the chance to hang out with non-work people. I think I suck at like maintaining friendships with people I don't have like actual work projects. I need to like learn to just dial phone numbers more or something. I blame myself, but I don't know. Friends.
I think that there's a life cycle to friendships. Like I've always been one of those people who's like hyper ADHD, and so like I kind of like have been I've developed some experience, I should say, at giving myself a break for not texting people and stuff like that. But like there's like now in my old age at 34, there are a number of people I've lost touch with that I wish I didn't. I assume that's only going to get worse.
I think, I mean, I'm 45, so jeepers.
26.
But it's like I think it's just a little bit of a tragedy that like in order for me to be your friend, we got to work together. That's how it feels. And maybe it's just that like I'm in a phase of life too right now where I'm building a whole bunch of different stuff, and I have kids, and I'm trying to take care of my own health, and that means that like when somebody says, "Hey, let's grab dinner," I get and I feel terrible, but I have a lot of friends that are like, "Hey, let's grab dinner in the city sometime," or let's go, get a drink. And it's in the back of my mind, I'm just like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. That's just not gonna. It's like I don't even go on dates with my wife practically because the shit is too hard to organize. It's like I'm gonna organize this stuff and go out for a dinner with people that aren't my family or isn't at work. It just feels like so hard to fathom, and I just need to get better at it.
I mean, like, I think you also need to give yourself some space, to like, because I think that like, though it's like, it's, there's this like great thing that I remember from like a group therapy session a million years ago called "Are you shoulding on yourself?"
I should. Where that's what you're saying. The word should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like when you're saying like I should X, I should Y, like you're shoulding all over yourself.
Should happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And like I think like I used to have this thing where I would like sleep in and then feel like the biggest piece of crap in the entire world. And like I would be like, well, I could have done so many things in that day, but here I am, I slept until 2 p.m. I'm such a piece of trash. And like one of my therapists was like, Sloan, you should really reframe the way you're talking to yourself about that. Instead of saying I'm such a piece of hot garbage, try saying I needed that. Like when you wake up at 2 p.m., wow, I needed that. I mean, like,
like literally say those words. Like how you talk to yourself matters.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's stupid. It's like we are these hairless apes, but these like saying stuff like that aloud and like watching our self talk is like such a. I mean, I say this because I've been fighting my demons for a long time.
Basically, that's why we do the podcast, right? We like just like cathartic. What's hard for you aside from all of the stuff we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, aside from everything, I don't know. I'll go with, sleep's been a little tough recently. I'm in a very exciting phase. I've got a lot of stuff to do. But the downside is that means I'm working about 75 hours a week, which is a lot. Is it that when you lay down in bed you can't sleep, or is that you're not sleeping because you're working so much? It's that when I I can stop working, but when I go to bed, I can't sleep.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, and the thing is, like, the thing that sucks is that a lot of my best ideas come at like 1:30 in the morning. And it's like, it's the shower thought or whatever, and it's like, but yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I think the basics just get more and more important every year, baby.
It's true.
Flossing, sleeping, laundering yourself.
I've been
That's the key
investing in
success
sleep
drivers right there.
pretty hardcore. I mean, this is going to sound embarrassing because I invested in one of these like 8 sleep mattress covers, which changes.
8 sleep?
It's EIGHT, and it comes with an app. And I am outing myself as like one of these tech nerds, but it's cool. It changes the temperature of your bed throughout the night to maximize the likelihood that you attain deep sleep. And as somebody who likes a really cold bed and my wife likes a really warm bed, you can actually change the temperature on each side of the bed.
Oh, wow. Better living through pneumatic innovation right there, baby.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Hyperloop of beds. Equally
Oh, my
insane.
God. It's just what we needed this whole time.
Anyway, I know you can get a cheap one that's just a cover, which is what we did. I mean, cheap. It's still like $1,000 or something. But it's the mattress is like beyond reasonable. So check it out.
I will. Yep. And and speaking of very sudden transitions. Wow. I recently learned, beloved listeners, that our question and answer form on the website has not been working for an unknown period of time.
Oh, no.
I learned this because our guest on the next show was like, I asked a question. Did you get it?
Oh, no.
And I apologize to you if you
have posted something on the website. Our website doesn't work.
Yeah, we're working on it. I mean, it's funny. I was under the hood on the website. It does get better every year around this time. Like when we get fussed up about it.
You can always email us or
Free Money Pod.
I've gotten a question given to me in a Slack, which we've had, if you remember. So there's other ways. What other ways?
I mean, like you can do on Twitter at freemoney42069. But yeah, I mean, like email, Twitter. I mean, you could do smoke signals, like they still have those planes at the beach that fly little banners around.
Yeah.
You could
skywriting. Maybe not smoke. I don't know how to interpret smoke signals, but I can read skywriting. With the smoke.
Fly by Ashby's house. It's like, with a banner that's like, is there such a thing as a liquidity premium? Anyway, this is the segment where we answer questions from guests. The first question we have for Dr. Ashby Monk is, do you have any thoughts about hashtag degrowth? And
I had to hashtag Google that because I didn't know what degrowth was at first, and now I do. And for those of you that were in the same camp as me, degrowth is about saying, well, capitalism seems to at times put well-being behind the profit motive. And should we instead put well-being ahead of the profit motive? Is that your understanding of what it means?
Yeah, basically it's like, my understanding of it is that, like, it's basically the critique that economies around the world are organized for perpetual growth. And that goal may not be aligned with human flourishing.
I have sympathy for it. I just think that it's like all of these things that the solution doesn't quite read on what the problem is that we're trying to solve for. If we're trying to raise all boats, I'm okay with an ambitious humanity. I think we just need to put constraints around that ambition and find a way for profit and purpose to coexist. I don't know. Like, I really do believe we as a species are going to be interplanetary and that we're going to get free energy out of the sun. And I don't think that happens unless we continue to grow. We need to grow better, But I don't think like shutting down our ambitions as a species is necessarily like the path to flourishing and making everybody happy. I think we need to continue like to shoot for the stars.
Well, it seems like kind of a small idea with a big name in the sense that it's like very like memey and trendy to think about, where it's like, well, what if we organized our economies around degrowth? Yeah.
We just ASMR. Stop growing.
Yeah. The ASMR voice. Well, like, I mean, the idea would be like, okay, so, if you think about, the Chinese model of growth, like where, it's like, let's, bulldoze a highway and then put in another highway or whatever to meet a number.
Yeah.
I think that caricature is what a lot of progressives have of the economic model that we've been pursuing as a global society for a while. And like so I think it emerges as a critique of waste, and inefficiency and misalignment, with like kind of the underlying society. And like it sort of fails to fully be practical as a guidepost for people who are doing stuff. Because like I think about the organizations that I'm like invested in or whatever, and like, yeah, I'm not out here trying to, pick the 20 hottest growth stocks in the world or whatever, but I don't think that their situation or their impact would be materially improved by them scaling down their growth plans.
There's also an argument here, which I think is about like, I don't think we should stop at this point. Like, unfortunately, I don't. We decided through the Industrial Revolution, and through till now, that we were going to raise humanity up out of poverty and build industry and healthcare and all the stuff. Right? We've got a helicopter flying around on Mars right now. So there's like interesting things going on. But if we stop now, I think we would be stopping at a very dirty, inefficient moment in human history. And so you could, in theory, go back to the era where we weren't emitting a lot. But to stop growth now, I think puts us on a trajectory that is quite risky. Yeah. And, in my own life, we joke around like, my personal net zero commitment 2050. But the reality is like my own living has gotten much cleaner and more sustainable, even in the last 5 years. I drive an electric car. I have solar on the roof. Like I'm using the water that we use in the bathtub to water the plants. It's like all this sustainable, resilient, efficient living is happening as we kind of enter into this next phase. And so I wouldn't want to hinder capitalism from delivering all of that sustainability and efficiency. We've come too far in a way.
I do like the idea of like everyone sitting around at a negotiating table at the UN or something like that, and the progressives having something they can really scare the corporations with, so that they, so that they can actually enact some pretty toothy regulations. Like I think that like if you can go out there and be like, hey, Bernie Sanders is talking about degrowth. All we're trying to do is like, give you a couple, carbon taxes or whatever, or use taxes or whatever. I feel like, in a way it moves the Overton window towards more regulation, which is probably a good-ish thing.
It's interesting. The argument you just made, I feel like, is why we still experience climate deniers, because they are aware that the climate crisis can be leveraged for a left agenda around regulation, which I think is probably okay, because I want to actually make sure our families survive on this planet for a long time. I don't think we're interplanetary for a long time. And even if we got to interplanetary levels, it won't be nice. You're going to be living in a very uncomfortable life on Mars. You're not swimming in the beach on my Belizean island.
Yeah, luxury space communism. That's what the goal is here. That's what that's what George Washington inscribed on a secret napkin and put on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
The Don't Look Up, where those guys get on, literally they get on a spaceship, they get to that planet, and then they get eaten. Right? Sorry, did I just spoil it? Sorry. Anyway, people will forget if they watch.
Nobody, yeah.
But the point is, so I'm all for using the climate crisis to make sure that we're growing in a more sustainable way. I think like the fact that we are using the climate crisis, that is why you still find people on the right saying things like SEC comment letters this year saying things like carbon dioxide is a gas that we need to grow plants. Like, what are you talking about? This is a pollutant. Like, there's a whole thing written by this guy at MIT that has been circulating.
Oh, God.
And it's like wild, that people are still making these arguments. But I think they're making it for the same reason that people on the left are making hey, we got to use climate change to get regulation. This is all a battle over how much regulation. Anywho.
That's a great, I mean, like, the never-ending regulation battle. This is a really, like, I do not know what to think about this question.
Okay, hit me.
This year, pensions are expected to be among the largest sellers of interests in private equity funds on the secondary market. Yep. What do you make of this? Is it some kind of harbinger?
It's not a harbinger. It is actually a reflection of strategic asset allocation and getting out of target. And so what you're finding is what we all know, and what one of the reasons why so many pension funds like private equity has nothing to do with the risk return profile of the private equity. It has to do with the fact that the marks are accounting marks. And so they don't move as quickly. And that is actually useful if you're a pension fund in a crisis to maintain your net asset value. And so if you're a public pension plan, your public stocks drop 30%. Your private marks may only drop 5% or even be flat. And that is a buffer. Now, that doesn't mean if those assets were actually meant to be sold, that they wouldn't be sold at a discount. They would be, but the marks in there are more resilient, not because the assets are resilient, but because of the accounting treatment. So all that is to say, you're seeing a lot of pension funds that had their other assets move quickly in terms of prices. So you went from having a 50% exposure to public equities and your 12% exposure to private equities. Well, all of a sudden, your public equities dropped considerably, and now that's at 38%, and your private equity is now sitting at 17% of your portfolio, something like that.
Gotcha.
And you are obligated, according to your rules, to get yourself back to target within a certain amount of period. And that, I think I read something in the FT probably about 3 weeks ago, where a lot of public pension plans were exploring secondaries just as a way to get back into their weightings so that they could buy more public equities with their private equity, buffer.
That makes sense. I mean, like, hey, that's a story that you don't hear often. Pension funds, running to allocate to public equity.
Rebalancing is what we would call it, but rebalancing from the illiquid asset into the liquid asset. Usually, the liquid asset is that kind of valve, the stress valve. It's like we use that to buffer. But if markets move too much, like they did in the last half year, you're sort of obligated to then look to your other asset classes like private equity. And so that's been happening. I don't think this has to do with people finally giving up on private equity as a return driver.
Somehow, I think that is going to be the thing that people are forecasting for the entire rest of my life. The death of private equity. I know. All right. So this last question is for me. I tweeted this out yesterday, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. So I keep trying to be one of these considerate handwritten notes people, but my handwriting
I love that.
Terrible. Like by terrible, I mean like I got extra time on the SATs because my handwriting was so bad. I got to take it in a completely different room, in a proctored environment, et cetera. Like the whole special treatment, et cetera.
Yeah.
But and of course that means that the notes that I write wind up looking like they were written by a child. Should I just, let my freak flag fly? What do you think?
I had an idea here, which I've done a lot of, which is to type notes out, not on a typewriter, but print them out and then sign them with blue ink and to write a friendly PS.
That's a good
you know,
idea. That's a
because
good
it
idea.
feels like, I mean, the writing can still be personal, and the fact
Yeah.
that you've printed something out and put your mark on it with a signature and then a PS with a smiley face and a little drawing or something. I like that. I get that a lot. In fact, I feel like I got a note like that. Who was the chairman of the Yale endowment? Charlie Ellis. Charlie
Yeah.
Ellis, yeah.
Yeah. One and only.
He wrote me this nice note. He was like, "Dear Ashley." I was like, "Wait, that's not my name."
Aw.
No, I'm just joking. He got it right, actually. But that would have been like hilarious if, I'm telling this story about the superstar and he got my name wrong. Yes, but he typed it up and then he wrote a nice PS at the bottom. And I found that quite nice. And it's actually sitting in my office at Stanford. I pinned it up. I liked it so much.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's very encouraging. I mean, it's better than my fallback strategy of like basically doing one of those 5-year-old portraits of like me and the person I'm writing the letter to, just like standing and smiling. Like, hi, by Sloan Artel, age 34.
Yeah. Awesome.
And just sort of like trying to make a side market for myself as an artiste.
I love it that you're handwriting notes. It is.
I mean,
the
not
lost
too
art.
many. Not too many.
Yeah.
When
I was living in Europe, I was a big postcard writer, and I would write postcards to people that I don't think even expected to get postcards from me.
It's a really nice. That's a good way to keep up with old friends.
That is.
You can, like my grandmother is like the queen of keeping up with people. And part of how she does it is she just has this insane Christmas card collection that she, like has been in touch with for, this group of people she's been in touch with forever and whatnot.
I don't do that. I don't do the holiday cards. I get a lot of holiday cards and I'm always voraciously reading them, but I don't do them.
This might be the year.
Yeah. I just don't know how to do it. I guess
I
will take the family photo and print them up.
It seems very stressful. And like, oh yeah, by the way, just go find all of your friends' real world addresses. That's not going to be stressful.
Totes.
Like, what kind of psychopath is sitting around with 100 friends mailing addresses? Anyway, what do you got for our
anybody's?
Yeah, like I mean, I would probably wind up like Googling it and sending it to people's work addresses. What kind of garden tips you got for me this week?
I think that was our sound effect.
Maybe sound effect. Maybe sound effect. Wait. Wow. The suspense is just all right. Well, I mean,
nope. Okay, I'm giving up on your
this,
sound effect. Hit me during my.
This is almost too good of a platform. I just, yeah.
Well, my favorite is when you then finally just hit the Riverside FM or whatever, because like you could always do their.
Oh yeah. Well, I was trying to play that actually, and it wouldn't play.
Oh, okay, shit. All right, never mind. My garden tip is part tip, part app. The tip is just very simple. Mandevilla. It's a plant.
Mandevilla.
Yeah. It is so beautiful. It is a vine, and we've put it in pots in our backyard, and it climbs up and around and frames this area that looks out onto our grass. And they call it Brazilian trumpets, I think. It's but they're like red looking trumpets, and they flower for like 4 months. It's insane. And so I would say like the tip of the lifetime is to just like get Mandevilla planted, because it does take a long time for them to grow up and get to that point where you're framing something. But to put one on each side of something that you can envision having, gorgeous vines climbing around. The other thing that I was thinking the other day is part of becoming like a reasonably sophisticated gardener is understanding the plants that are in your environs, your geography. And I am terrible at names and I'm terrible at remembering, but there is this app I've been using for the last 3 or 4 years called Picture This.
Oh, she's a beaut. She's a beaut.
And I have a professional Subscription. I think
A
it costs me
professional
even upwards of $25 a year.
Wow.
I'm on Picture This Pro, and it is worth it because when I take a picture of a plant out there, it's almost always right. It's so technologized, it's nuts. You can watch it scanning the picture, and then it comes back and tells you everything you want to know about the plant. And the Pro license lets you take pictures of your own plants and diagnose them for problems.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, I have a subscription to that app, but I way underutilize it. Although I will say, like, it makes walking around in the neighborhood just so much more fun because I can
Totally.
It's like playing Pokemon. You know, you're just like
It is like Pokemon. There's
Yeah.
a map too, and what you do is you're walking around. It will show you the pictures you took on a map.
Oh wow.
There's a map
Wow,
functionality.
Well, that's pretty great. And then you get the time lapse. Whew. I mean, the garden tech they're building these days, so innovative.
I know.
You know, I'm glad you brought up climbers because they are what a beaut. You know, I
The
have
best.
a lot of heartbreak with climbers, and every single time it's because I did a stupid thing. I didn't build my climbing structure before I planted my climber. You know, I sort of figured I would fill it in later. And you know, everyone out there is like, Sloan, you're such an idiot. How could you do a thing like that? You know, you're not going to build it later.
They might not be saying that, but
No, they're probably like, I don't even know why I listen to this podcast. But planting your plants without building
for the guests.
without building a trellis, like, is this woman insane? No, but like you know, like Ashby says, put your plants somewhere that you could see them growing in. You know, I would underline, you know, see them growing in.
Yeah, I can see climbers behind you right now.
Oh yeah, those are my wall climbers. Those are my
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's I sort of, you know, actually what inspired this is another podcast alumnus, Jay Littman, is making these great YouTube video or LinkedIn videos for his company Ethic about sustainable investing. And I was like, you know, how's he get to be so smart and brilliant? I want to make good videos too.
For real.
And I was like, what's his secret? His secret obviously is that he has plants behind him.
That is true. There's a lot of plants in those videos.
Yeah.
It's a lot of greenery. It looks like a sustainable office space.
I can't match his accent, but
and
you know,
Jay sounds quite smart. And he is. Look, to give him credit, he may be also quite smart. But the plants and the accent, that does 80% of the work.
I'm hoping I can skate by on just plants.
Me too. My Canadian Californian accent is not giving me the amazing
I mean, I don't know.
vibes.
You got that's the global accent, you know.
True.
But yeah, like we all know how bad I am at accents. I'm not going to do them and punish the audience.
Governor.
Oh no.
So.
No. I've been getting in trouble recently. Do you have anything else to tell people? I don't know if I do. I think I think my brain is blank.
Are we back on tomorrow?
One more day.
One more day. Okay.
One more day.
I'm gonna spend a bit more time getting my news. I got a bit more time for news.
Tomorrow, your Canada is
tomorrow. What's that show about?
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
I'm looking like money. Now make it rain on 'em.